bringing attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Good evening, everyone. This is Andy Steele, your host. Thanks again for tuning in. Tonight, my guest is Rudy Dent. Rudy is a former New York City firefighter. He was there on the day of September 11th. It was his day off, but he reported for work because obviously there was a major event going on. They needed all hands on deck, and he was there when Building 7 came down. He also saw the molten metal at Ground Zero, so he talks about it in this interview, and of course he agrees with the thousands of building experts who have put their name to Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth's petition calling for a new investigation into the destructions of the 3 towers that fell in New York City on that epic day. And he believes, obviously, that it was a controlled demolition. So we'll be getting into that in the interview and a whole lot more. It's very interesting to listen to him and listen just to his historical narrative, too, of being someone who witnessed one of the most important events in our nation's history. This is a fairly long interview, so I'm going to be playing that for you in just a minute. Before I do play that for you, we'll do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all of the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We'll do that starting now. Okay, and that is 10 seconds. Now, before I play the interview, as you hear it, you're going to hear the guest talk about his narrative of that day and his own suspicions that he had right from the minute that the event happened, that he watched Building 7 come down, knowing it was a controlled demolition, that there was much more to this crime than what he was being told on that day and in the years that followed. And occasionally the conversation goes into complicity and who he believes was responsible and why 9/11 he believes happened. So let me just reiterate that Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth takes no stance regarding complicity or any other aspect of the 9/11 crime beyond the evidence that the 3 buildings in New York, buildings 1, 2, and 7, were brought down in controlled demolitions. And pushing for a new investigation of those building destructions. So the opinions expressed on this show by guests and occasionally myself on other parts of the 9/11 crime are strictly those of ourselves and do not reflect those of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Rudy Dent is a Vietnam veteran with 2.5 years combat as a helicopter gunship crew chief. He spent 4 years as a New York City police officer and 32 years as a FDNY firefighter. He was there as a firefighter on 9/11, so we'll be talking about that and his own view of the 9/11 crime today. Rudy, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you, Andy.
Just to give our audience a better idea of you and your background, why don't you go into it? Tell us about yourself, your career that I kind of just glazed over, and then that'll take us up to the day of 9/11, which we'll move on to next.
Okay. I grew up in the Bronx, a suburb of New York City. And I went to art and design, and my first love was commercial art, fashion illustration, fashion design, and then I got into illustration and photography. Right after I graduated from art and design, I went straight into the service. And from there, I ended up going straight to Vietnam. I did 2.5 years in Vietnam. And when I came back to the States, I came back right on New Year's Day, 1970. While I was in Vietnam, I was a helicopter crew chief for a UH-1C helicopter gunship. And it was a very exciting experience. I got to actually fly the ship and do things I never thought I could or would be doing in my life. And Anyway, upon returning to the States, in 73, I got called for the police department, and I became a policeman for 4 years. I worked primarily in Harlem. It was a high-crime area, and I got a lot of experience down there. I got called for the fire department in 77. And I took off. I was ready and happy to go to the fire department because the police department was really stressful. You know, there are problems there that can use a lot of improvement within the fire department. I mean, within the police department. Now, when I went into the fire department, it was like heaven compared to the police. We have a lot of former policemen who have become firefighters. However, I think I only know of one case where a former policeman who has become a firefighter has returned to becoming a policeman. So as far as becoming a fireman, I went into Tower Ladder 33, where I became a chauffeur for the 75-foot tower ladder. We were in the Tower Ladder 33 and engine 75. We were, when I got there, one of the most, if not at certain points, the most busy firehouse in the city, if not the world. Got plenty of experience, worked with great guys. Now, at the time that 9/11 occurred, I was off on that day. I was home, and I got a call, and I was told, go look at your TV, and I looked at my TV, and I saw the second plane come in and turn and go right into the building. At that time, I, as well as other guys who were off at the time, were called in on recall. We returned to the firehouse. Those guys who were working at the firehouse had to remain there for coverage on their designated areas. So those of us who came in, we got our gear, we commandeered a mail truck, and we made it down to the World Trade Center. By the time I got there, both buildings were down, Building 1 and Building 2. I'm sorry, both towers were down. Now, Building 7 was still standing. We did a lot of staging, and that is preparing to go in and do a methodical search of the area. We expected to find a great deal of bodies and so forth. However, it was like a moon scape, you know. It was like a talcum powder residue of about, I say maybe 6 inches deep. That is a white, grayish powder, fine, you know. And as I said, we were staging, getting ready for an organized search of the pile. And at that time, I saw Building 7 come down. Building 7 just came down exactly as the same videos I think everyone has witnessed, wherein a building is carefully rigged to come down on its own footprint. That takes several weeks to do. It's a highly coordinated, highly specialized event with strategically placed charges throughout the building that are exploded at within seconds of each other. Everything is done perfectly in order for that building to come down at free fall in its own footprint. I witnessed that. I saw that with my own eyes. I did further research after that. But let me back up to one thing. On that day, we lost 343 firefighters. 343 guys were gone, in addition to several thousand civilians. Also, we lost more people on that day than we did at Pearl Harbor. And which brings me back to something called the PNAC. That's an acronym for the Project for a New American Century, which I had previously read when we had the first bomb scare or the first bombing attempt. Let me correct that, the first bombing of a World Trade Center. I stood there alongside the FBI in the building while they sifted for things as small as a paint chip. And if they got hold of that, they could take that paint chip, and that paint chip, through forensic analysis, can tell them, it can tell them the make and model of the vehicle that it belonged to. And there's a lot of painstaking work, but I observed the magnitude of that explosion. That explosion was tremendous. It was huge. And I think it was a serious attempt to bring that building down. However, the van in which it was in was not strategically placed in the proper position to take out the correct supports that might have brought the building down. But I did witness that. Now, while in the fire department, I was fully trained as a fire marshal. A fire marshal is considered a forensic detective. He has many skills, but along with those skills, he is accepted in court as an expert witness, and he is able to give his opinion as such. He also has the power to administer the oath, take testimony, and issue a subpoena without a judge. Now, having said that, fire marshals are considered expert witnesses because they have to study everything there is to know about the fire from the 4 leading experts on the subject. So, again, I was there. I witnessed the building come down, and let me back up a little bit. I was there, and I witnessed the second bombing where the Building 7 came down, and I knew that it was a false flag operation. And my mind raced back to the PNAC, which is the Project of the New American Century, which calls for a catastrophic catalyzing event. I was aware of all these things, and there was no one to talk to about it because no one is ready to believe that their own government would be involved in such an event as to against its own people. But this is, in fact, what did occur, and I witnessed it with my own eyes, and I saw it, I understood it, I knew why it came down. And again, we lost 343 of our guys. And in the fire department, we're a little bit closer than police are because we get to, picnic with our friends, our families, and we're very close. Fighting fire is a challenge every day. You put your life on the line, but you do so because you know you have 100% backup from your fellow firefighters. That's what made the job exciting and rewarding because you actually get to save human lives. I'm very fortunate to have had an experience to work with some of the greatest guys in the world. I mean, the job itself is a calling, and it brings out the best in the best. And again, I was fortunate to be in that situation. Now, having been down there and being previously aware of the what I have openly stated is without a doubt a false flag operation that was designed to get us into what we are currently in, which is endless wars. You know, an Orwellian misnomer where we have war on terror, which is another double speak. You know, how can you have war on terror? Terror is a condition. It's not an actual, you know, it's not an actual event. We are the terror. But anyway, getting back to the situation on 9/11, I saw it with my own eyes. I watched the building come down, and I knew what it was when I saw it. I had to endure all the outrageous cover-ups that followed, and without very many people that you can actually talk to, because people are just not aware. They don't know.
So, well, just getting back to the day of 9/11, because there's a number of people that are going to have questions. People have submitted them to me from our team, just in anticipation of you coming on, because you were there, you saw it, and from what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you were suspicious from day one. You came after the first two towers came down, but you were there to watch Building 7 come down, and your position within the fire department classifies you as an expert witness in any kind of trial if it were to ever come up. Obviously, it was a crazy day, so it's hard probably to capture what was going on in your mind there. But you say you knew that what you were seeing when you saw it. So when you were standing there, you knew that you're watching a controlled demolition. Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes.
Now, there's been talk, and I want you, I'll let you elaborate on that in a second. But there's certain things that get brought up, things that I don't normally go into because it's things that people can dismiss as saying, oh, well, he didn't really mean that, regardless of whatever common sense says. Like Larry Silverstein saying, pull it. I don't get into that as much, even though it's very curious and interesting. The other side can say, well, he didn't really mean it that way, and then it becomes into an argument about semantics. But there are people that have come out and said that there was a countdown on the radios. Did you see anything like that going on that day? Or what about foreknowledge, firemen saying the building's about to blow up, those reports that have been coming out in various...
Okay, no, I didn't hear us or any of that. But I will tell you this. I was in the staging area, and I observed the building come down. I saw it with my own eyes. Now, as far as Larry Silverstein and pulling the building, we have no such terminology. We're not in the business of demolition or destroying buildings. That is not a part of the New York City Fire Department. We don't do that. We have no such terminology that I am aware of. So, in answer to your question, I didn't hear any radio operations, as far as the countdown was concerned, but I did later do research wherein Larry Silverstein was verified as having made that statement, which is a very damning statement, very incriminating. Many people should be in jail. There's no question in my mind. It was short of a coup, and they sacrificed thousands of lives in order to kick off this aggressive, endless war on terror.
Now, with the term pull it, Larry Silverstein's defense, or people who defend him, say that he was referring to pulling the firefighters out of the building. Is that a term that you've ever heard used with respect to pulling firefighters out of a building because the fire is uncontrollable, safety?
If this wasn't such a serious subject, that would be laughable. But I will say that is an absolutely ridiculous statement for anybody to put out there. I think it's an act of desperation in order to do damage control against the truth getting out. There's no such term. He would have had no such position to make a decision as to what to do and when to do it with the lives of firefighters. As I said before, we are a very tight-knit group, and when a chief becomes a chief, he studies several years. He has several years of study under his belt, as well as actual time in the fire. What makes us so close is that our lives depend on each other. And when we go into a burning building, if we get trapped, we know, we absolutely have absolute confidence in our comrades, our fellow firefighters. They're going to come in and grab us. I mean, my very first fire when I first started working, I had a collapse come down and knock me down. The beam came down. And before I could blink my eyes, I was in the street. My guys had jumped in, grabbed me, and dragged me out into the street, one of which took a minor concussion, and it ended his job. It ended his career. So that's the kind of atmosphere that, we had in the fire department. So...
And you said Larry Silverstein's not in any position to make that decision, so I just want to clarify, and pardon me if I sound a little redundant with the questioning,
no,
but I just want to get it on the record. If my house burns down, or if I have a house on fire, or a business on fire, or a big building I own on fire, even if I have more money than God, do I have any say in whether or not we're going to have the firefighters leave the building?
That's a good question. I don't care if you were the President of the United States. You couldn't walk up to our chief and tell him what to do with the lives of his fellow firefighters. We trust each other implicitly because we are actual warriors when it comes to fighting fire. We put our lives on the line. We know how dangerous it is. We accept that. But we also are able to do our job because we have absolute confidence in each other. And we trust our officers and we trust our chiefs. So there's no way possible that the president himself could walk up to a chief in a actual fire situation and tell him what to do. Wouldn't happen. The chief would tell him what he could do with his orders. Interesting.
Now, you said you saw the cover-ups afterwards. I'm going to want you to get into that. And before you do that, obviously you're standing there, you're watching the building come down. You just witnessed a controlled demolition. Were you thinking that there had to be something bigger to the plot, like at the very start? Because I played a few weeks ago a broadcaster named William Cooper, right on the day of 9/11, saying, just invoking his own common sense, saying there had to be secondary devices in those buildings to bring them down. Now, he had been talking about the Twin Towers. I don't think he even probably knew about Building 7 because it wasn't really covered that much in the big excitement of the two bigger buildings. But he was saying that day. So was that you and the general consensus that there had to be something bigger than just planes hitting the Twin Towers and then the fires that resulted on Building 7?
The answer to that is no. The general consensus is of the people who are basically still asleep and through no real fault of their own. The mainstream media is I would say it is the elite's most powerful and effective weapon of mass manipulation and mass deception. That is,
right.
We have all been subjected to 24/7 lifelong indoctrination and propaganda, and the ultimate goal of which is not, the supreme example of power is not armies and guns and bullets and bombs and drones. It's control of the hearts and minds of the people. And how do you do that? Through absolute control of the mainstream media.
Right, and our audience is and I don't mean to interrupt you, I just want to clarify my question.
Please do.
I'm talking about among the first responders, the people that are there, the people watching Building 7 come down, the initial reactions of firefighters and along with yourself to what everybody just witnessed. Not necessarily now, here 13 years later, but right on that day on the street and the people who are directly involved in the event. What are people hypothesizing, the firemen and cops standing around there? What are they hypothesizing they just witnessed?
We didn't talk about it because it was a shocking event. We knew how we had lost so many people. Chiefs were in shock. It was a traumatic experience to have lost so many so quickly. And I myself lost 3 very close friends, Tommy O'Hagan, who was an incredible human being. I mean, Kenny Campbell and another friend, and we all went to as many funerals as we could take, and that was a trauma. So as far as having any opinion as to what happened at that time, the families were in a state of grief, and it would have been inappropriate to even raise any such questions. As a matter of fact, I'd say the majority of a fire department are patriotic, true blue, rah-rah, whoopee-doo, whatever you say, Mr. Commander-in-Chief, we will do. It's that kind of patriotic loyalty that is unquestioning. However, there are a few of us who are aware, who may be referred to as truthers or quote-unquote conspiracy theorists, who have actually been studying and seeing clearly what's going on. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and it kind of gets into my next question I was going to ask, because eventually the smoke clears, time moves on, and people feel more comfortable to come out and talk. You've already sort of answered this. I'm going to ask you to elaborate. Did you talk to other firefighters about your suspicions, and what was the general attitude? Was it just kind of don't talk about that, or was it the kind of indignation that the mass media generates? What did you experience if and when you talked about it with them?
It was more don't talk about that, and it was more about grief of the losses. It was more about taking care of the families of the fellow firefighters who had lost their fathers. A firehouse will tend to be 100% supportive. You have to pardon me, this gets a little emotional for me, but supportive of the family, when there is a loss. So the general attitude that I witnessed was more in terms of grief, more in terms of the trauma. A lot of firefighters suffered post-traumatic stress disorder from this event. I even saw a chief walking around, in a state of denial, and he was saying, but I told him to come out. I told him to come out. And he was already internalizing the guilt factor for probably accepting that maybe he didn't do everything he should have, that, to get them out, when in fact he had done everything properly by the book. One of the things, we have a saying in the fire department, let no man's ghost come back to haunt us for lack of training. And we have the best training in the world. We have the best firefighters in the world, as far as I know. I honestly, I haven't been all over the world, but we have a great crew, and I trusted them with my life for the entire time I was in the fire department, and I would never hesitate to do so, not for a second. So, that's the kind of atmosphere we had. People did not question or even think of unpatriotic thoughts such as, conspiracy theories and so on. I hope that answers your question. But, please, this is an emotional issue for me, so please ask me, questions if I get off on a tangent. All right?
No, you're doing fine, and it's almost like you're anticipating my next question and your answers here, because I was going to ask you about PTSD. I saw articles about it. I think you were interviewed in one in an article that came out about the PTSD post 9/11 and the first responders. And you were quoted. Now, obviously, you were suspicious right from day one of this. speaking to reporters, New York Times reporters. I remember there was an article that interviewed you, or a newspaper that interviewed you. Did you ever broach any of your suspicions with people of the mass media, quote unquote? And if you did, what was their reactions? What did you perceive from them?
All I remember is that a newspaper reporter had approached me to ask me for questions, and I already knew my suspicions because I was at the first bombing, as I told you. And to see it repeated again after I'd read and was aware of the PNAC, the Project for the New American Century, I knew it was a false flag operation. However, I would be viewed by my fellow firefighters as, you know, a conspiracy theorist, you know, and also it would have been inappropriate to, you know, question my government, my country, while my guys have died fighting for that same government. Andy, let me tell you what I told the newspaper reporter. I told him, according to standard operational procedures, I am not to be answering direct questions without approval from my superiors. All right? Generally speaking, within the fire department or the police department or any military or semi-military organization such as the police or the fire department, there's a strict protocol. And unless you have proper authority, authorization to make official statements to the media, then you don't make them. So what I did was I told the reporter, there's the captain, please, why don't you just go and ask him? So I deferred it. I didn't answer it because I know what I would have been telling them, and, you know, I know what would have happened, and it wouldn't have made any of my fellow firefighters or their families happy to hear that, you know, their loved ones were dead because their own government was responsible for it.
Now, what has changed? Obviously, I don't have the reach of the New York Times. However, you are coming out on a show and talking about this openly now. What has changed? Is it the fact that you're retired? Is it something else?
Yeah, well, I'm retired. I'm out of the fire department. I'm no longer bound by its rules and regulations. And also, I think I haven't been around the firehouse a whole lot. And the turnover being what it is, I don't think there are any guys. I've been out now for more than 10 years. What's it been? Jesus, it's been 13 years, hasn't it? At any rate, there's been a tremendous turnover. That is a highly physical, a highly demanding job. And, you know, if I go back to the firehouse now, there are a lot of young guys there whom I don't know. But what has happened is that if you go on the web, you can hear firefighters who were later interviewed who are telling you about the things that I myself witnessed, one of which is the flowing lava-like molten metal that was in pools flowing, you know, under the debris. I spent the entire night on the pile searching for bodies and such, and what I saw with my own eyes was molten metal, just like a volcano, just flowing. Now, the only thing that can bring metal to those temperatures is called thermite, and it's a thermite bomb that it reaches such temperatures that it turns metal into butter, and that is exactly what happened. That is what they used. And let me say one other thing. Never in the history of high-rise steel buildings has ever a high-rise steel building come down because of fire. And the simple reason why this has never occurred is because a normal fire does not burn hot enough to reach the temperatures that will compromise the steel structure of a high-rise building.
Well, that's right. And I mean, even without a plane hitting it, Building 7 wasn't even hit by a plane, and that came straight down in 6.5 seconds, supposedly because of fire. So, I mean, that doesn't make any sense, and that should be considered one of the biggest engineering events in history.
And that is
certainly
a key. That is a key issue. If Building 7 was wired, then all the buildings were wired, because they all came down exactly the same. Also, let me tell you one other thing. I was there for several weeks after I came down. We all took turns in coming down to work on the pile and search for bodies and the remains of our fellow firefighters and civilians as well. I'm sorry, Andy. Go ahead. It's still an emotional issue for me, and my mind is all over the place.
That's okay. I'll try to maybe stunt it a little bit with some very just kind of I guess technical questions. I don't know if it's even technical. Just fact gathering. First of all, did you get any pictures or any kind of footage of the molten metal yourself? I know that there's some that exist and they were taken, but did you get any kind of footage yourself of that molten metal?
No, not at all. We were down there with our equipment for firefighting procedures, or in this particular case for search recovery operations, and that's all. We're pretty much professionals. We don't walk around with cameras and stuff like that. Okay. We go there to do the job, and a camera would be burdensome equipment. We carry just the equipment we need, no more, no less.
Okay, and there would be other people documenting that stuff anyway.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, because someone wanted me to ask you that. But also, too, I'm just thinking, obviously, the first responders are in on it, and you have your own strong suspicions right from day one. You have these 3 buildings that just came straight down in a fashion that no one's ever seen before. Is there anybody amongst your first responder crew, colleagues, seeing the molten metal, just recalling what the events of the day and saying, okay, what the heck happened here? Well, this is unusual. Is anybody saying that, or just like you said earlier, people are just kind of caught up in the emotion of the week, they're just not talking about it?
Yeah. No, I can't say that I saw anything of that nature. Remember, we just lost all these guys. It still breaks my heart to think of the families whom I knew. I knew the children. I knew the family. It was like an extended part of my own family. And you're talking about a guy who took his kids out to the ball game, who were devoted fathers. And, and all of a sudden their family is deprived of a loving father. Their children are deprived. The focus was on quiet suffering, or I forget the word. I can't think of the word. But just sadness and remorse for our losses. That was basically it. And the media turned it into a frenzy of going after the designated fall guys, in the false flag operation. And that was it. There was very little talk that I remember at the time of anything to do with suspicions about a false flag operation and such. However, you can go on the web and you can hear firefighters speaking out shortly during that time when they were interviewed about having witnessed the same thing I saw, which is the lava-like flowing molten metal. And there is no question that could only have been done through thermite. Thermite is the only known chemical explosive that can produce the temperatures to make that happen. You can even see it pouring out of the buildings prior to their coming down. It's right there in your face. But again, as I said before, the mainstream media is so massive, it's so coordinated, it's so powerful that it decides what reality is for the uninformed. In order to begin to wake up, you have to take advantage of reading. You have to take advantage of the web, which is a source of information that they don't have full control of. And once you see one thing and your mind starts to wake up, then you start your journey of deprogramming yourself from the illusion most of us live in. So in answer to your question, I didn't see anybody questioning the government, because to the loyal, patriotic mindset of the average firefighter, that would be viewed as anti-American. They are very patriotic, and they don't question. However, after this, the attitude may have changed. However, I haven't been there to actually witness that, other than to tell you about the videos that I have actually seen myself.
Now, getting back to Building 7, you said you arrived after the two towers came down. Just estimating, what time would you have arrived to the area that morning?
Well, Andy, I can't honestly tell you. All I know is that I'd been there maybe 20 minutes, I'd say, or more prior to Building 7 coming down. I was facing it, and I saw it come down.
Well, the reason I asked this is because I have a question submitted to me about Mr. Jennings and Mr. Hess, who were trapped in Building 7 before 11 a.m. that morning. And, if you have any knowledge about that, or if you know anyone in the FDNY who was involved in that rescue.
I don't know about Jennings and such, but I do know that the police commissioner and the mayor were also missing at the time. They were in the building, and no one could reach them, and we didn't know where they were. This was common knowledge through word of mouth throughout all the firefighters who were present. And I forget for how long they were missing. And no one knew where they were, other than that they were in that building. And I guess they reemerged, obviously they reemerged before the building came down. But that building was loaded with all sorts of evidence. There was gold there, as from what I understand. But there were a lot of important cases. If one starts to do research, it just spreads all, the trails lead everywhere. In terms of destruction of evidence, not to mention the violation of the standard protocols of a crime scene itself, which was blatantly violated at the 9/11 disaster area. They went right in and they started destroying the crime scene rather than gathering evidence. And that was all a coordinated and orchestrated event to use the mainstream media to produce the illusion that they successfully produced for the mainstream population, which today, if you ask the average person, they probably won't even be aware of the fact that a Building 7 existed or came down. And those who are, it's all due to the work of the architects and engineers, who are a heroic group who have no political affiliations, who were never interested in questioning, approaching such a question. But being professionals as they are, there was no way for them to avoid the realities of the lies that they were presented with and could not palate. And once they did, they formed together, and they formed over 1,000 architects and engineers and the world's leading demolition experts who came forward and testified that this was, in fact, a controlled demolition.
Yep, and it's over 2,000 now. And, I mean,
yes.
People coming out and speaking up, using their professional backgrounds and their knowledge, and this is their common sense, a word I like to use, or two words I like to use on this show very often, because I'm not an architect or an engineer, but I do just rely on my common sense, and I just look at the physics of it, basic ninth grade physics, and the government story does not make sense. And this is something I wanted to ask you. The government's refusal to test its World Trade Center dust or any of its evidence or anything that it gathered from there for the presence of incendiaries or explosives. You mentioned this with regard to the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center. They refused to do it with 9/11, and using the circular logic that essentially boils down to they don't expect to find any, so there's no need to look for it. What's your comment on that? I mean, what do you have to say to the government on that?
Yeah, well, for me, it's obvious. I mean, it's blatantly obvious that it was an orchestrated and well-coordinated plan to produce the verdict that they came forward with. And they've done everything they can to subjugate the truth and put forward their ridiculous lie, which is absolutely ridiculous and blatantly so to anyone who's done the slightest bit of research on that issue. However, the mass public is still a product of the effectiveness of mainstream media. This is a very, very powerful tool. You control the hearts and minds, and that's the ultimate expression of power. If you lose that control, then you're going to have problems. And there is nothing that the power elites would not do to keep from losing control.
Now, what do you have to say, because I know you've seen at least some of the videos of the politicians being asked very simple, basic questions about Building 7 and either doing their phony outrage thing. A few of them give some pretty good or okay answers, but the general majority give really bad ones. And these are the people who are sitting in the third house of our government, or in one of the three houses, who have some power. At least people perceive that they do to do something. At least certainly their platforms that they have from their positions carry their voices a long way. What's your comment to them for their lack of interest in this story? I mean, I don't know how many of those videos you've seen, but there's been people who've answered almost like it's like some kind of hobby issue, like it's you're asking them to rename a park after some local hero, or get some kind of fungus classified on some kind of list with the government as protected plant species or something like that. Not the biggest mass murder on U.S. soil in our history. I mean, something that's just a critical issue still affects us now. They act like it's like some kind of joke, like it's something that they don't need to pay attention to, like they're helpless to do anything about. I mean, what is your comment to them, if there's any politicians listening, about their attitude to this topic?
Well, I would answer that by saying, first and foremost, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And sadly, we have not studied in our schools, as we should, the sacrifices of our founding fathers, patriots, and veterans who gave us the first free democratic republic, perhaps in the history of history. I'm not sure what other countries have achieved what we had when we beat King George, upon whose power the sun never set. It was a completely ridiculous and outrageous idea to even think that we could achieve freedom from such a powerful entity as King George. But we did. And we did it with about 4% of the people who rose up and decided to fight. And one of the things that they said at that time was start brush fires, as many as you can until it catches. And truth is a powerful thing. Truth, it has been said, truth is like a lion. Let it loose and it'll fend for itself. Lies, on the other hand, is as has been said before. Over the tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. A lie requires constant maintenance to keep it propped up there. As for our politicians, some of them are actually really dumb. They really are that dumb. But most of them, and you have decent people in there, honest, decent people, some of them, but they are the product of something called cognitive dissonance or normalcy bias or just plain conformist or aware but too frightened to stand up and speak out for what's right. Because to do so in America today is the act of it's an altruistic act where you pay for it with your life. Especially if you're an effective voice, you will be taken out. That is a fact they're all aware of. I mean, there are different levels of dealing with anyone who would dare to stand up and speak out from a position of authority. The first trick is, if you don't like the message, kill the messenger, and there are different levels by which you can discredit someone without having to kill them. And if you can't do that, then you kill them. But never, ever deal with the subject matter, because the subject matter will not stand up to scrutiny. It will not stand up to the light of day. So you do every trick in the book to avoid it. As far as these politicians are concerned, some of them are active participants. They are completely bought and sold participants. And our society and our mindset is structured so that many Orwellian misnomers, doublespeak, intellectual tricks are in place to prevent us from daring to deal with the truth. So if any of these politicians were to dare to speak out, they would be immediately discredited. If there is anything that anyone had on them, especially the elites, they would use it to destroy them. At the very least, it would cost them their career.
And you mentioned normalcy bias earlier. I just want to clarify for our audience, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're actually in a good position to talk about this as a firefighter, somebody who's dealt with disaster situations, because fire is a disaster. If you're in a position, let's say you're here in my house right here in upstate New York, we don't have tidal waves or flood. I mean, there's floods that happen in the area, but it doesn't ever reach my area. But if someone might come to somebody in my area and say that there's a flood coming here, actually we just had major floods in a town near me, but a side note, but they might say there's a major flood, there's a tidal wave or something. Because it's never happened before, people tend to take it less seriously. I mean, because it's never happened before, they haven't experienced it before, something about them just makes them refuse to act. You see this like in situations with a volcano where it's about to erupt and people somehow think that everything's going to be fine, even though if that lava gets to them, it's going to burn them up. Still, they remain until it's too late. And you see that here now with the situation with 9/11, where we're being lied to on such a massive scale. Most people have never had an experience with something like this, and there's no precedent really for it in their knowledge of America and the kind of education that we get. So even despite all the overwhelming evidence and eyewitness accounts of the explosions going off that day, people still think I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it because they have that normalcy bias. And I want to ask you, before we close up, the show today. You can comment on what I just said, but also with firefighters, any firefighters that might be listening, who may be aware of the same things that you are, whether they're FDNY or they're just in other parts of the country or the world for that matter, who are aware of the same stuff that you are regarding 9/11. What do you have to say to them about this issue, about the need to speak out for it?
Well, first of all, start doing the research and wake up. If you're truly patriotic and if you truly care about America and if you truly care about the future of your children, our sons and daughters, then you have an obligation to enlighten yourself and face the truth, deal with the facts, and wake up. Because for the majority of us, we are asleep. And as far as firefighters are concerned, as well as most civilians, they are pretty much patriotic, go along with, baseball and hot dogs and, all the American dream, we're the greatest and rah-rah, whoopee-doo. But they need to get away from that, and they need to start facing reality, because reality is going to come back to bite us all. And, that's what they need to do. Try to think of this. The greatest fear any human being has is fear of the unknown. A child will find solace in holding its parent's hand and get a sense of security. Now, if you went to that child and tried to tell it that it cannot trust its parents whose hand it always seeks for security, what are you going to do to that child? You're going to leave it traumatized in not knowing where it can find security. And that's the dynamic that works with the masses. That is, they need to trust the mainstream media. So if the mainstream media says it's so, and that's the official word, they go with that because it gives them the comfort they need to survive. If they can't trust it, they're put in a position now where they don't know what to do, and then they're going to look for leadership somewhere else, and it would have to be from a militia, or some other radical group who's already been negatively stereotyped as terrorists. The responsibility is with us as individuals. We need to understand the sacrifices that were made to produce a once great country.
Well, we are out of time. Rudy Dent, thank you so much for coming on 9/11 Free Phone and telling your story.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate the opportunity to do so.
Thanks for listening. Remember, you can hear this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download this show by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week. Good luck.